All right, everyone. So, welcome to our workshop at the University of Kentucky, offered by the Office of Work Life. And we offer these monthly workshops to encourage you on your work life journey. And today we're going to be talking about managing burnout and increasing your job satisfaction. And we have our guest speaker with us today, Rhonda Henry. She is a LCSW, one of our therapists here at the university. Thank you, Rhonda, for being here with us.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here with you all talking about one of my favorite topics. How do we increase that job satisfaction and manage the hard times that we sometimes find ourselves hitting in our jobs? So today we're going to be talking about and covering a few different pieces. As Azetta mentioned, you're going to get the materials afterwards, so you'll have a chance to refer back to these things. And I know I'm going to be covering quite a few things kind of quickly, but I want to be sure that you've got kind of a bigger kind of overall picture of some of these important parts of this. So we're going to talk about those components of burnout. We're going to take some time and really understand that sort of stress response and how we complete the stress cycle. That's such a key part of in managing this. And then we want to dig in a little bit to how do we reconnect with our purpose around our career, our job, and how do we bring in gratitude practice as part of self-care and managing that. So again, lots of different pieces we're going to touch on, but they're all very interconnected, and hopefully are going to kind of serve as a good kind of 40, 45 minutes to talk about this topic. All right. So we know that from the kind of originating work on burnout, Freudenberger found there's three kind of components to burnout. There's that emotional exhaustion. So we carry too much for too long. We're feeling that exhaustion. Sometimes we find that depersonalization. So we feel a little bit of a lessening of empathy or caring or compassion. So that in our job, that might show up, as, maybe my coworkers tell me about something they're struggling with, and I don't have much bandwidth to care about that. It's like, yeah, I'm having a hard time, take that somewhere else, or I can't take on somebody else's, burdens or problems. So we might find that kind of present more than what's typical for us. We might also be feeling some of that decreased sense of accomplishment. So feeling like what we're doing isn't mattering or doesn't matter in the way maybe it once did. So those are kind of those three kind of core components of burnout. There's some elements we know that contribute to work burnout. I'm not going to dig into each of these, in a lot of detail, but I wanted to highlight a few of these, and we're going to kind of come back to these in some of our, as we talk about some of the ways that we can moderate some of these impacts. We're going to come back to this list and refer to it a little bit. So it's really difficult for us and kind of puts us in a vulnerable position toward burnout when we feel like we don't have a lot of control over our work. We don't feel like we're getting much recognition or reward. Doesn't mean we've got to have a parade thrown for us, but do we have actual meaningful kind of recognition or feedback? Sometimes if we've got too many job demands or things aren't really clear, maybe roles are a little bit murky, we're not really sure what's on our plate or what's on someone else's. Again, it doesn't guarantee we're going to move to burnout, but it definitely, these are things that make us more vulnerable to it. They kind of set the stage for this. Anytime we're doing work that starts to feel monotonous or unchallenging, that more kind of high pressure environments or chaotic environments, anytime we've got extremes in activity, big surges of demand and then kind of boring or really quiet times where we don't maybe feel as motivated. Lack of social support, not feeling connected. We saw a lot of these things pop up a lot during the pandemic, just in kind of unique ways. So, even if you're doing, sort of hybrid schedules or depending on what that social side looks like, if we don't have some social connection or social support, we can definitely feel the impact. That kind of concept of work-life balance, I think, that's always one that we're striving toward. I don't know that we ever fully achieve it, but when it really starts to feel like things are out of balance, again, it puts us in that vulnerable position. And then certainly when we're working in those kind of helping professions, excuse me, where we're serving other people, in some capacity, again, makes us more vulnerable to that. And also our personality traits. If we are more kind of in our personality, more in that kind of high achieving type A personality, a little more perfectionism, sometimes because that really speaks to kind of high standards often for ourselves or our colleagues or other people we're having to deal with, it can really lead to some places of friction, when things aren't maybe going the way that we need them to, which again can make us vulnerable to that burnout. So just kind of noticing, as you look at that list, which ones of those, again, might be present for you or which ones, you've seen in your job that might kind of come up from time to time, just so we can kind of cue into that. Because again, we're going to talk about some things to try to moderate and protect against some of these issues. So when we think about ways to increase job satisfaction, some of these first ones here, in general kind of feedback, doing something you enjoy every day. So like where you have a chance to have some input on your schedule, looking at that workflow, having some autonomy in how your day or your week is structured or your month is structured, hanging out with people that are a good influence on you, being aware of who you're talking to, how long you're talking to them. And again, doesn't mean we have to avoid everyone or not have communication or relationships with lots of folks we work with, But when it's a little extra time, when it's time for a break or for lunch or you're, hanging around, working something, who are you talking with? Who are you processing with? And we definitely know that can have an influence. Doing some things where we can reflect on our accomplishments, looking at emails we've sent, looking at the things that we've gotten done. Those are some protective pieces. The pieces that I want us to dig into are these bottom three, talking about the stress cycle, talking about the value of gratitude practice and how it fits in, and that connection to purpose. So those are the three I want us to dig into a little bit more. So as we talk about the stress cycle, I'm going to be pulling from this book, and I'm a big one. I like to show you where my things are coming from. So when we're talking about stress cycle, I've lifted a lot around that from this book in particular. I think it's a really good book. I know a lot of different units around campus have read it and found it to be useful. The link that's in the middle there is a podcast episode. The authors are on for about an hour, kind of talking about the first third of the book. It's a nice way, if this resonates with you, it's a nice place to check that out. See if you want to dig into that a little bit more or read the book itself. And so when we're talking about our stress response, I think it helps just to start with the framework of what is the purpose of stress? Like, why is this coming up in our world? And where does it move into sort of a red zone, a problematic zone? So we know stress is not inherently bad. Like, we have stress all the time, in the world. I had a little stress before I came onto this presentation, not because I'm used to working with Azetta, I'm used to talking about this topic, I'm used to Zoom things, but a little bit of stress made sure I was on time. It made sure, my slides were ready, even though I had the wrong one pulled up initially. Like, it makes sure that we're kind of doing those things. We're ready and we're kind of tuned into what we are responsible for. It kind of boosts our functioning in the short term. That's the important piece. Short burst, short term. When we're in that stress response, we've got a lot of chemical responses going on in our body. So we've got, and these are just some highlights of that, but we've got really big production of adrenaline, cortisol. So we're feeling these different hormones are moving through our body. Those neurotransmitters are signaling our brain to feel fear or to recognize fear. And that's an important part in this, because when we think about the stress response, we're going to get into fight, flight, freeze and stuff in a couple of minutes. But part of that stress response is our brain kind of going into sort of scanning for threats. So it's kind of looking for, what's the next thing I need to be worried about? What's the next thing on the horizon? And so sometimes that can get overactive. Fear can really kind of take the lead, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It can this when we're in stress response, it is impacting our body, y'all, in all the ways. So all the systems. And those things again in short terms, short bursts, when we can have a stressful thing, we go through the spike in the stressful thing, then we come down from it, we get back to baseline, we can handle that, we can metabolize that. The problem comes though is when stressors end, sometimes we are still kind of left in this stew of all these chemicals going on in our body. We're kind of locked in that stress response, even when, the event's done, the grant's submitted, the presentation's over, and I'm still locked in this. My body is still kind of geared up for battle. It's ready for what the next problem is. And so when we get in that space, and we talked in that last slide a little bit about just kind of those systems being impacted, this graphic on the left, it's one of the better ones I've found, but honestly, it doesn't even really hit on all the different system impacts that are going on when we're kind of in that stress response. So I think that, we have to know when we talk about things like, how does stress impact our health? Where's the root of our heart attacks, of our other health conditions that are coming from some of the stress in our body? It's because all of these systems get such an impact when we are kind of in the space. And until we can kind of break out of it, until we can cycle out and come back to more of a natural resting space, all of those systems are getting impacted the entire time. Often that kind of green line that I've got there, this, can we handle what we're facing? That's often where our thoughts honestly serve to make the situation worse. Often our thoughts go to, how am I going to get all this done? How am I going to finish this by that deadline? What if so and so doesn't help with their part? They never, show up with whatever it is. We start kind of going through the thought process of whatever the stressor is. And honestly, for us, that typically heightens the stress response. Our body's getting more activated. We're getting more geared up and ready. And that's really what's happening with all these impacts in our system. We're gearing up for a fight. Now, that fight might be an email's coming and I'm feeling really stressed about it, but our body's responding the same way as it would respond if the bear's chasing us in the woods. Our body's not differentiating that. It's just sending these signals through our body. Again, what we're thinking, what chemicals are getting produced and released. We're just preparing, our body's preparing for battle. Whether that battle is at my desk because of an email or in the woods because I'm running from a bear, my body is going through some of the same things. Okay. When our brain senses danger, and a danger is often something's coming that I can't handle. It doesn't mean danger's coming in the form of a bear. Something big is coming at me. Some responsibility, some ask, some stressor is coming at me. quicker than we can make rational thought about it, our body moves into this automatic survival mode. All right, gear up, get ready. For a lot of us, when I'm working with clients individually, I'll talk about noticing where in your body stress shows up first. For a lot of us, it may be stomach. Yeah, my stomach immediately is off. My shoulders get real tight and crunchy. I start getting a headache. Noticing where in our body this stuff starts to show up and where we start to cue into it can be really helpful because it lets us shift into some of this management mode. Let's see. Okay. So, and again, keeping in mind, this is a self-protective response. So when our brain is doing this, it is really the purpose of it is to protect us. I mean, to prepare us for something hard. And it's almost, y'all, this may sound like an odd comparison, but it's one I use with my clients a lot. It's almost like having an overly helpful friend who's always telling you something to be worried about. Oh, but you might watch out for this, but you might watch out for this. You might be worried about this. This might not go right. And it's like, yeah, okay, I hear it, but I don't need that right now. And I think sometimes if we can start to sort of see that impulse in us in that way, it can help us not have such a negative self-image about it. Often I'll hear folks who get really hard on themselves. Why do I respond this way? Why can't I just, manage whatever's coming along? And I think if we can approach that with a little more self-compassion, it can be a little more effective in how we manage it. If we can start to notice again what situations kind of activate the response and where is this showing up in our body, that's going to help with the next piece. We know that repeated exposure to stressful things makes our brain more efficient, and I definitely use that in quotes. So we're moving into fight, flight, freeze mode a little more quickly. So again, if it's something that comes up a lot, maybe you've got a really, kind of a relationship with your supervisor that's got some friction to it or some difficulty in communication, you might move into this mode really quickly, even before really a problem has popped up. Even small interactions might kind of put you in that headspace because our brain goes there quicker the more we do it. Prolonged stress makes it just more difficult to move out of this. But I think understanding that purpose is really important, that it is a self-protective piece. Take a minute to look at this. I'm not going to go into all of these blocks in detail, but just take a second to look over this. I think most of us are familiar with the concept of fight, flight, freeze. We know in general kind of what that is, what the general concept is. But I think most of us think about fight, flight, freeze as that top row of either fight being confrontational, I'm picking up the stick and fighting the bear off. Flight being I'm running and hiding. Freeze, that idea of tonic immobility, deer in headlights. I'm frozen in place. I can't really do anything. But I think sometimes we don't always see some of the more subtle ways that this shows up and some of the more kind of just day-to-day ways that this might be kind of showing up in our lives. So I just want you to look at this and notice, and kind of see where you see yourself in there. Do you see some of these things coming up? Do you notice more of these coming up than what feels typical? Does it feel more burdensome or heavier for you? And again, we can all have some of these some of the time, but if we're noticing them coming up more regularly, it's a good sign that maybe we need to do a little work to get a handle on this. Okay. We know that when we're in that stress response, we have to do something that signals that your body that you are safe, or else you'll stay in that state with those neurochemicals and hormones degrading your body, but never shifting into relaxation. All those systems, the digestive, immune system, cardiovascular, musculoskeletal, and reproductive system, never get the signal that they are safe. And so that's coming straight from the research within the burnout book. And I think it's just to me, it was just a really powerful statement to remember why it's so important to make this shift, because our body is experiencing this, even if, again, a stressor has ended, if we're not doing something to take charge of that. So the way that they sort of approach this is within the book, this is one element that I really like with it, is they break this down into kind of 7 areas, 7 things that we can sort of do to help break us out of that stress cycle. So when we've been in stress cycle, we're feeling all that sort of armored and ready for whatever the battle of the day is, writing the report, giving the presentation, whatever the thing is that's brought the stressor up. When we are finished with that, we need to be able to do something to get back to balance. And so they've broken it down into these 7 categories. And I personally find these really manageable. I mean, I pulled them when I was reading this book initially and thinking about how to use this with clients. I pulled this into my own life. I took those 7 and put them in a list on my phone. And was like, okay, you want to use this stuff with other people, like use the stuff yourself. Figure out how do you use these 7 things to manage some stress. Again, if this resonates with you, I would encourage you to do something like that. You'll have a post-it note or have a note in your phone where you can remember and come back to it. Because it's hard when we're really stressed out to sort of remember, what was that thing I was supposed to do? What did that woman talk about? And so having something, again, if it resonates, having something where you've got that reminder can just really help to kind of take it from it's a good thought to how do I put this in action? What do I actually do with it? So let's touch on the 7 areas just so we can understand kind of what they're talking about with this. And again, if this resonates, that one podcast episode, they go into it in a little more detail. So when we talk about physical movement, that might be exercise. For some people, that's a great outlet. If that's something you're into, if you're a runner, you like to walk, that sort of thing. And that's lovely. It also, though, can mean just other physical movement. So, maybe when you get done with something, if I say I was super stressed about this presentation, I was really anxious and having a hard time going through this. Maybe when I got done at the end of the hour, I would get up and just walk around my building a little bit. I'd go down and fill my cup up or go stand outside for a few minutes. Where I get a chance to let my body know, like, we're done. We're done with that part of whatever was going on. I finished this task. So being able to move a little bit. If this is at home, it might mean maybe you had a really hard phone call and you're sitting in your spot in the living room that you normally sit in, and you're really just in your head. You're thinking about some family stuff you heard on this phone call. Maybe it's just getting up and like walk out to the mailbox, go into your backyard and pick up some sticks, like moving your body around a little bit. It doesn't have to be with exercise. That could be one way, but it's not the only way. Doing some gentle stretching, think about all those systems we talked about being impacted. That musculoskeletal system is a big one. So stretching, opening those shoulders up a little bit, doing something that kind of calms your tummy a little bit, having a little something, simple to eat that kind of calms some of that down. But anyway, any kind of movement. Looking at mindful breathing. So I love this one. And y'all, this one is just, whew. Mindful breathing is one of the simplest, most effective tools that we have available to us. It does not have to be complex. That's why I use the word mindful here. So we're going to talk about a couple of ways to do this. I often find, I've worked with clients for a lot of years. I'll just say breathing is one of those things that people have a lot of mixed feelings about. People will come in, don't tell me to breathe, or breathing's not going to help anything. I'm going to talk through why it's useful. Whether you use that, whether you choose to pull that one in is obviously up to you. But I will say it's one of the more effective tools that we have in our toolkit. So, knowing that doing that kind of regulated breathing, some structured breathing, it definitely can down regulate that nervous system. So it's sending the signal to our body. Essentially, we are not in danger right now. There's no bear chasing us. We are not in danger. We're using the breath to bring the rest of the system down with it. Okay. It automatically slows the heart rate. And again, it's bringing and adjusting that system down. If you want more kind of bang for your buck as you're trying this, combining this with soothing touch. If you could see me on the video, or maybe you can see me a little bit, putting a hand on your chest, over your heart, putting hands on your belly button, letting yourself, even soothing touch, kind of rubbing your arms, rubbing your hands. Those things will give you more bang for your buck. It'll calm that system more quickly. Couple of just simple options for some structured or mindful breathing. And again, there's a million out there. There's certainly lots of YouTubes, apps, different things to use that. A couple of really simple ones. One is called square breathing or 4 square breathing. You do an inhale for a count of 4, you hold it for 4, exhale for 4, and hold the exhale for 4. Or doing even counting your breaths. If you're trying to go to sleep at night, that's a lot of times where these thoughts will rush in or will struggle. So even counting in breath is 1, out is 2, in is 3, out is 4. Count up to 9, back down to 1. Anytime where you're doing just some mindful breathing, kind of connecting to that, it's regulating that body, bringing that system down a little bit. Certainly lots of lead breathing activities through, again, apps, YouTube, those sort of things. Positive social interaction. This can be a connection with somebody that So it can be, coming home at the end of the day and you see your person, your roommate, your friend, your, kids, you're having that positive interaction with them. But this also works with strangers or with people that are colleagues. So if we're going to, get some lunch, taking a minute and slowing down and cueing into that moment, letting ourselves who again release the breath a little bit and just be present with who we're with. Maybe we're at the drive-through and we're making, a joke with somebody. It's again reminding our body and our brain we're not being chased at the moment. We're taking a minute and we can connect with somebody because we're not in danger at this moment. It helps us down regulate. It helps us break out of that stress cycle. Laughter, like a genuine laughter, kind of knowing what gets you there. And whether that is like familiar TV shows, listening to comedians, even some research even shows that the memory of good laughter. I've got a really like experience with my mom in church one time, when I was younger. We laughed and laughed, we were so embarrassed. And we can get to laughing, even thinking about the memory of laughing about that because it was so funny at the time. So anything that gets us to genuine laughter. And keep in mind with these 7 categories we're talking about, we don't have to be doing all of them at all the time. So if it feels like laughter, I don't know what gets me there. That's not really one that appeals to me. All right, well, maybe you invest in some of the other ones. But I think having, again, these 7 sort of ideas or categories and knowing that these really help send our body the signal to step out of that stress cycle. Hugs are another just great one. So, we know that research shows us if we're able to do a 20-second hug, really leaning in, being present to it, it has such huge impact on our body. It shifts those hormones, lowers blood pressure, heart rate. It produces oxytocin, which is that bonding hormone. So we're gonna get a lot of positive benefits from that. We can also get that benefit when we're snuggling with our pets, when we're hugging a friend. It says I think sometimes we think about hugs in terms of like romantic connection with folks, but like letting ourselves hug if that feels comfortable. And again, if this isn't a space you're as comfortable, using some of those other ones, that's okay. But letting ourselves, have a moment, just to, again, cue into the moment, be present, and let our brain have a chance to catch up and remember, like, we're okay right now. Right now, we're all right. Creative expression, I really love this one personally. This is a really good one for me. There's this concept within psychology, this idea of flow state. And when we're in flow state, it's when we kind of lose track of sort of time and space. We sort of lose ourselves in it. For a lot of folks, probably some of the more common things I hear people losing themselves in are things like reading, if you're able to focus. Sometimes stress really can interfere with our ability to read for pleasure. And that's a whole other point. But just to mention that, that's not uncommon. If you notice that you used to be able to focus and read, but you're finding it really high stress times, you just can't get there, that is a very, very common issue to come up. Sometimes looking for some of these other creative outlets can give us a chance to go into that flow headspace. So it might be kind of traditional art and craft things that you think of, photography and scrapbooking or writing or embroidery or sewing. But it also might be other places where you just get to use creativity. So maybe it's, rebuilding cars, maybe it's, gardening or rearranging your house or cooking. So, looking for opportunities where you get to use maybe a part of your brain and a part of what you enjoy doing that you don't always get to tap into. When energy or time is low, even doing things like, if you're a Pinterest person, go into a Pinterest board and building something around your interest or playing around with your tools a little bit. Things like there's lots of good apps like, PixArt and Happy Color. So if you want to do something on the go, I know a lot of folks who use that as part of like their lunchtime break, and they kind of use that to disengage a little bit from the headspace of work, which is a really good, effective one. So again, thinking about creative expression with that one, I would encourage you to think outside the box a little. Again, if you're really drawn to typical traditional arts and crafts kinds of things, that might be easy. But if that doesn't so much appeal, think of maybe other creative spaces where you get a chance again to lose yourself a little bit. And then crying, y'all, like this one gets its last little slide all to itself because it is just crying is a challenge for a lot of us. I've got a lot of clients who struggle with either feeling like I cry all the time and can't control it, to I can't cry, I don't want to cry. And honestly, with some fear of if I start crying about the situation, I don't know if I'll stop. It feels too big. The other resistance I see a lot for folks, in letting themselves sort of express themselves this way is that feeling that maybe it's not going to solve the problem. Like what's it going to help? Who cares? I can sit and cry about it or I can get up and do it. Some version of that lots of us have heard. And I would encourage, if that resonates with you a little bit, I would encourage you maybe to think about the difference between, dealing with the stressor itself and the thing that caused the stress. There's a difference in how we deal with that. And what I mean by that is crying's job is not to fix the underlying problem. Crying is not going to get my grant written or it's not going to get my presentation given. Crying's job is to take care of me so I can release some of the pain of the pressure I'm feeling so that I can come back to a regulated space. So I've got something in the tank to give to whatever the stressor is. But crying is really letting ourselves have the vulnerability to release some of this from our body. Because as we've talked about, and y'all, we could talk about like we could make a whole day of talking about some of this and the stress response and what's going on for us. But we know there is such a major response in our body and how much that can get trapped in there. If we do not find some ways to metabolize and get some of that expression out, it turns on us, it hurts us, it degrades our body. We know more about how salt degrades our cars than we do about how these chemicals harm us when we just sit locked in the space. So, being able to do something like crying or having some expression where we get that pressure released for a little bit is good for our body. If you're crying, trying to be just really present to it, not trying to be in that space. And we have often, many of us, won't say all, but many of us have been there where we're trying to stop it. I'm trying to don't let anybody see I'm crying or go in the bathroom and like get it together really quick. If we're in a safe space to cry and we're feeling the urge to, letting that out, letting ourselves be present to it, trusting that it will end and that it's not something that needs more thoughts. We don't need to, but what if this, but what if that? It's okay just to be with ourselves and just acknowledge like this hurts. This is hard. This has been a hard day, and just being present to it, it lets us process effectively. All right, I'll get off my soapbox about crying. When we think about our stress response, again, another quote from the doctors Nagoski, to be well is not to live in a state of perpetual safety and calm, but to move fluidly from that state of adversity, risk, adventure, excitement, back to safety and calm, and out again. Stress is not bad for you. Inherently, it is not a bad thing, but being stuck in that cycle definitely has issues and is a problem and is bad for us. So keeping that in mind, we want to be able to step into demanding situations and step out effectively so that we can take care of ourselves. All right. So what else helps? We've talked about that stress cycle and the importance of that. Let's go back to again, these connect back to some of those other the list that we had of sort of risk factors for burnout. So these are some of the protective factors that we can kind of bring in to try to neutralize or manage some of those issues. And depending on your role, you may or may not be in a position of authority, to actually implement something, but you may be in a position of influence. But certainly for folks who do have some authority or some autonomy to make some changes, these are things that can be good for work groups in general. A culture that promotes any kind of meaningful self-care and acknowledges burnout. I think it's easy sometimes to feel like, if we ever talk about it, well, it's just going to make everybody start thinking about it. Well, no, if folks are experiencing this, we're experiencing it. We don't need somebody else to point it out to us, but being able to have a safe and supportive environment where we can talk about it. I did nonprofit work for many years, and we always did like a major annual fundraiser. And it was for me, it was honestly the worst part of my job. I hated it in every aspect. The only thing I could connect to was I appreciated that it supported our work, but I hated the tasks of it. And so, when we acknowledge that, like, okay, after this big fundraiser, our administrative staff was pretty burnt out for a while. We needed to be able to deal with that. We needed to be able to shift gears a little bit and actually have meaningful support for each other, through that period of time. So sometimes it's really obvious and there's kind of a bigger sort of window pointing to it. Other times, again, we're having to do that just on a day-to-day basis. What's going on, checking in with each other. Having clarity in roles and expectations is a really important one. Because again, having the clarity in role and expectations does not completely guarantee we're not going to have some burnout or some higher stress, but a lack of that definitely is going to contribute to those feelings of burnout and dissatisfaction. So, if when we're going through periods where maybe we've got an extended hiring process, and we're really struggling to get somebody into a position, and so everybody's pitching in a little bit, it's getting a little bit murky on who's responsible for what, that's a really vulnerable time for burnout, if we've got those kind of things going on. If maybe we've got some people changing positions or some reorganization happening, and we know that's just a really tender, vulnerable time for burnout. Having room for growth and opportunities and some spaces for input, some opportunities for input, sorry, room for growth and opportunities for input. Being able to have input, that does not mean that we all sort of get our way. I'm going to run the unit and what I say is going to go and we're going to change all these things. But having meaningful conversations, having meaningful paths for input, it helps. Most of us want to be heard. I realize every idea I have is not a brilliant one, but I want a chance to throw them out there. I want a chance to toss them back and forth or see what somebody else thinks. And so having some of those things in place, even if, again, we're dealing with maybe diminishing resources or we're dealing with, an open position, we might still have some challenges, but having that opportunity where we can have input, where there is a path for growth, where we're able to develop, those are meaningful things for most of us. And then meaningful recognition. I think that's a big one. And really engaging with staff to understand what is meaningful to them. And I won't go down that road too far, but you all know, like we all know the boxed pizza party. Like, and we appreciate it on one hand, but is that what our group needs? Is that what's actually kind of conveying the message we're wanting to convey? So having some space for those kind of conversations, what's meaningful for our group? What would matter? If we get to the end of a big project, what would be helpful kind of on the other side of that to really sort of acknowledge the work we've done and give ourselves credit? And then the last two I want us to talk about in just a little more detail. So let's move on to the slides around connecting to purpose and gratitude practice. So when it comes to connecting to purpose, I think one aspect of that that can be helpful is really thinking about like, what is your why? Like, why are you at this job? And this breaks it out into these sort of three categories. There certainly may be overlap among these. There may be, it's 50% this and 20% this and 30% this. It may be at different chapters in our career, we feel different ways about our job and sort of what that relationship is. I would encourage you as you look through this, and kind of look at these three different sort of perspectives to really think about kind of where do you mostly land at this point? If it does feel like it's kind of split between them, what does that mean for you? What does that look like? And really thinking about the importance of where work sits in your life right now, just in this chapter that we're currently in. Because again, other life circumstances can sometimes just shift us. If we're in a place where, we're doing a lot of caregiving, maybe you got elderly, loved ones and you're in a caregiving role, and it might feel like, okay, work's feeling a little unsettled right now. And so just letting ourselves think about this point without judgment, without there being one that's better than another, but just an honest assessment of where we're at, I think can be useful. The other thing that I think can be helpful is doing a little bit of reflective journaling, honestly. And whether these are written out, whether you use these to, maybe you talk to a trusted friend or a partner about some of these and kind of talk through them. I put these together specifically around just this point. How do we reconnect to work? Like, what does work mean to us? I have a lot of folks who come to me trying to make some choices about, is it time for me to make a job change? Do I need to leave? Do I need to go outside of UK or like whatever the thing is, maybe they're tossing around. And sometimes using questions like this to let ourselves kind of dig in just a little bit deeper, beyond just, well, am I happy at my job? Well, I don't know. Some days, yeah, maybe. Some days, no. Or do I feel satisfied at my job? Well, again, those are not easy answers. I think if this part resonates with you, and especially, if you're either making some choices about where work fits in your life or, is a change something that needs to be on the horizon, if that resonates for you, I would really encourage you to dig into some of these questions, honestly, letting yourself think through just these different layers of that work relationship. And it's not like you're going to come at the end and, I'm going to come hand you a certificate saying, here's the answer to all the things. But what it does is it lets you reflect and notice what's coming up here. If I found in two or three of these questions, I'm coming back to the same issue about, I don't know, conflict with my coworker. What is that telling me? How do I need to then deal with that information? And so I think it gives us a chance to get a little bit of that deeper insight. Okay. And now let's talk a little bit about gratitude practice. And this is, I will admit, one of my just favorite parts of things to get to talk to people about because of how effective it is. I'm going to be honest and say, if you all take two things away from today, the importance of breathing, breath work, doing some breathing at different points, pausing and kind of getting in touch and using that to ground yourself, and this gratitude piece, I think are the two most important takeaways in terms of getting the most bang for your buck, having really effective impact in using them, and pretty quickly seeing some response. I think these are two really important areas. So that being said, when we look at gratitude practice, as sort of the framework I'm looking at is looking at these two components. We're affirming good things that we've received in this world, and we're acknowledging the role that other people play. So we're cueing into things that we've received and the benefits we've gotten from other people and kind of acknowledging that. The research, you all, it is as clear and consistent and unambiguous as it can be that gratitude is good for us in all the ways that are listed there, all the points. There is lots of research to back those pieces up and to see the benefit of it. It's one of those things I pull in with clients a lot because of how effective it is. And let's talk about why it's effective and why this works. Because what I find is both with breathing and gratitude practice, they sound very small as concepts. The impact I find is much bigger and it takes much less investment. But to get the buy-in, we got to understand why it works. And we got to understand why we're actually making ourselves do this. So when we think about gratitude practice, a couple of things are important to sort of understand. One is that our brain has this negativity bias. This is just how our brain is built. Our brain is going to remember and store and process things that are negative or feel threatening to us in some way in different ways because it's a survival mechanism. Our brain wants to keep us alive. That's its only job. And so to keep us alive, I need to remember, oh yeah, when I walked out in that field, I fell in that hole and almost broke my ankle. I need to remember that differently. It also means, though, when I think I maybe misspoke in my presentation, am I going to sit there and ruminate about that? I'm going to come back to those negative things, come back to those stumbles, in some way in life. And my brain's going to elevate those. It's going to store them and remember them and bring them to the forefront a little bit more. And so when we find ourselves just getting in kind of a difficult negative headspace, it's gratitude practice is one of the things that can help our brain make a shift. This is different than toxic positivity. So please hear me with this part. When I'm talking toxic positivity, that is the, put on a smile and everything's going to be great. Just think good thoughts and you'll have a good day. Like that kind of just kind of fluffy, um, honestly unhelpful, and things that make us feel bad about struggling in the first place. Gratitude practice is different than this. Okay. Gratitude practice is bringing in some aspects of life that give us a fuller, more accurate story. So when we are struggling with hard things, Yeah, there may be hard things. Maybe I did, really flub and have an issue in my presentation. Maybe I really am having a hard time getting something done by a deadline. Those things can be real. And at the same time, I can be grateful for the fact that I have a boss that's really supportive of me, or the fact that I have, a dog that is just, who, when I get home, I'm the best part of their entire day. It doesn't mean it's saying that the stressors aren't important and valid in our life. But what it says is, in addition to that hard thing, I sure am grateful to have some of these other pieces going on. Part of the reason that this works is it is training our brain to look for some of these other experiences, some of those other things to complete our list. We're going to talk about how to do it in just a second. But it trains our brain as we do it as a practice to continually be scanning for what is the thing for the gratitude list today. Remember, we talked about scanning earlier. When we're scanning for threats, when things feel dangerous, our brain is constantly scanning for threats. It's that negativity bias. What's going to hurt me next? What's going to be the next thing I got to fix? What's the next problem to solve? And again, it's a survival function of the brain. What we want to do is remind ourselves, pull ourselves over a little bit into another direction to remember also the things that are good. We know that anytime we are in these sort of acts of kindness, feelings of gratitude, it's producing dopamine. It's really going to be a good improvement for our brain, for our attention, for memory, for mood, attention, all those things. So we know that it is helping balance and bring in some chemicals that are more beneficial to us. When we think about how to do this practice, a couple of things I like to point out. And again, I'm not the authority on gratitude practice. I mean, there's a million articles we can read about this or ways we can think about this. This is a pretty consistent way of doing the practice if you're looking for just a simple way to get started. So typically, I encourage people to choose 3 things a day. And when I say be specific, I mean, I'm talking specific because you all, on any given day, here's what I could be grateful for: my partner, my pets, and my kid. Not in that order, but like those are always going to be 3 things I'm really grateful for and legitimately, honestly, genuinely grateful for. But if I just say that to myself every day, that is not stretching my brain at all. That is not getting my brain to do something different. It's just like, yep, sure, I'm grateful for them, but it doesn't really change anything in terms of how I'm functioning. The more specific we can get, when we can really hone in, yes, I'm grateful for my son as a person and that he exists in this world. But if I'm thinking about, okay, what am I going to do in my practice today? And what am I going to say? Well, last night, he made some banana bread and he knows I really like it. And he drove across town and he brought me half the loaf. And I'm really grateful I raised a kid who can cook something on his own and is thoughtful and willing to go out of his way for me. The more specific I get, it really opens up that experience. It really lets me sit with that experience. My gratitude practice might be 2 minutes, 5 minutes. It may not be a huge part of my day, but slowing down, letting my brain shift into that space, really honing in on, again, could I say I'm, happy I've got a good supervisor? Sure, I've got a great supervisor. But if I can go in really specifically and say, yeah, I was really grateful that when I brought up this problem, she gave me a couple of ideas and she sat and worked through it with me. The more specific we get, the more benefit we get from it. This idea of habit stacking, some of you may be familiar with that concept, but just the idea of kind of putting gratitude practice together with something else you already do. Sometimes it can be hard as we're trying to start a new habit or remember to do something daily. So maybe you do this, as part of your morning routine. You think about the yesterday and you kind of reflect, or maybe it's when you come home at night, after you fix dinner, you sit and pull this up and you decide to do it before you go to bed. Putting it in a specific space or doing it along with something else just can help us remember. And then certainly if you're drawn to keeping a list, whether that list is on your phone or in a notebook, having a chance to go back and look at those things again, it elevates those in our memory. All right. So if, kind of hearing all these things, sometimes we are struggling to the point that we're just not sure, maybe I need more help. This sounds good, but I don't know if I can get over this hump, or this has been going on too long, or this feels too big. These are some of those indicators that it might be time to talk to somebody like me one-on-one, or one of the health coaches, someone else to help get some perspective. So thinking about intensity, or you feeling how big are feelings feeling for you? Has this feelings been sticking around for a while, going on for a while? Is it interfering with other things that are going on? Is it getting in the way of your enjoyment of things? How much is it impacting overall life? So again, if some of those resonate, that may be a time to think about talking to somebody, just to kind of dig into your specific situation a little bit more. We are the 4 full-time therapists that are here within the health and wellness team. So all employees are eligible for services through our office. The next slide is going to show you how to get to those. We're the 4 full-time folks. We also have some contract therapists available on the page as well. And this is the information about how you actually access our services. So all employees are eligible for 5 visits through our office. It is completely free and confidential. It does not connect to your personnel file or your health records. We are just kind of segmented off in a different system altogether. This is available to employees as well as sponsored dependents. And then obviously we do